BBC Radio for Schools. Radio History, The Romans in Britain, Programme 5, The Twilight Years, presented by Dave Arthur.
Today we're going to look at Britain at the end of the Roman occupation, and I've come down to Porchester in Hampshire to see the massive Roman coastal fort that's still standing here 2,000 years after the Romans left it. The sentries up on these 20-foot walls must have watched plenty of ships leaving Britain for Rome and seen just as many of the dreaded Saxon longboats trying to sneak past to raid some unsuspecting village along the coast. Although for a while Rome managed to control the Channel pirates with the help of these forts and the navy, in the end she didn't have the manpower or the money to keep the defences up to scratch, and more Saxons swept down from the northern coast of Europe to rob and to kill, and eventually to settle down and make this southeast corner of Britain their home. But of course, it didn't all happen overnight. I mean, there wasn't a particular day when a Roman general said, "Right, come on lads, we've had enough of Britain, we're leaving this morning." Of course not. It was a gradual process, and Roman control slowly went downhill over many years. The rot started to set in 367, when the Scots, the Picts, the Atticotti, the Saxons and the Franks all got together for the first time and attacked the province in force. The British garrisons, which had been weakened by having troops sent to fight on the continent and never having them replaced, just collapsed under the mass attack. Hadrian's Wall was overrun, and the occupants of hundreds of forts, garrisons, villas and small towns were massacred. Eventually, Count Theodosius came over from Gaul with 4 regiments and managed to get the province back under control. But things were never to be the same again. Rome itself was having a bad time. The empire was under pressure on all sides from Goths and Franks and Vandals. And despite the efforts of the brilliant military commander Stilicho, who dashed about the empire trying to secure all the northern borders, in 406 the Germanic tribes swept across the Rhine frontier, and in 410 Rome herself was overrun. Honorius, the ineffectual emperor of the Western Empire, fled to the safety of the city of Ravenna, which was tucked away in the middle of a marsh, and he spent the rest of his time breeding poultry. It was at this time that he sent the famous letter to the cities of Britain, telling them that in future they must defend themselves and could no longer expect help from Rome. Central government in Britain collapsed, and there weren't enough troops to defend the frontiers, so many people left the countryside and the villa estates and sought refuge for their families in the large walled cities and towns such as London, leaving the country estates to be run by slaves and labourers under the control of bailiffs. Some local authorities solved the problem by employing German mercenaries to protect them, but this didn't always work out because the hired soldiers frequently revolted and took over parts of the country for themselves. But for many people, life carried on much as before. And as I said, the collapse of the Roman way of life was a gradual one. Houses and towns would fall into disrepair, roads ceased to be maintained, and the occasional villa or village would be burnt down or perhaps taken over by wandering gangs of robbers or pirates. But this all went on over very many years. And as the Roman influence was fading, new influences were affecting the countryside and the British people. Influences brought in by the shiploads of Saxons, Angles and Jutes that sailed across the North Sea with their wives and children and household goods and tales of their dark northern gods, to make a new life for themselves here in Britain.
This is the song of the Saxon sea-wolf. This is the song of the salt sea foam. This is the song of the shining sword blade, singing a song of the death of Rome.
Quiet! If you drop that sword again, your hand will feed the fishes.
Breakers ahead.
Rest your oars, but keep quiet. Lower the sea anchor. Quietly.
We're off the mouth of the river now. Look, you can just see a light in one of the houses down by the harbour.
Good. We'll wait out here till dawn, then we'll go ashore and kill them in their beds.
This is the part of the coast that my father raided over 40 years ago. I remember I was no taller than this blade, when he sailed back into our settlement with a bloody sword and his ship low in the water, overflowing with treasure.
Yeah.
Gold dishes and cups from the Christian churches, weapons and armour, hides, cloth, jewels, and even a few seasick cattle.
Yeah. That must have been around the time of the Great Raid that almost drove the Romans into the sea. The one they called the Barbarian Conspiracy. Keep your eyes open up there in the bows. We don't want to end up on the sandbanks like a beached whale.
I've heard the far side stories about that expedition. And the harp songs of the heroes. The Saxon sea wolves.
Yes, that's the one. My father was there, and they were all heroes. The Romans had never seen anything like it before. For the first time, the Saxons, the Franks, the Scots, the painted Picts, and the man-eating Atticotti all joined forces and attacked Britain from every side, in 100 places at once. And the Roman defences crumbled. Yeah. They didn't know where they were. Lots of the garrisons on the northern wall didn't even bother to fight. They just opened their gates and invited the Picts in. The country was ablaze from end to end. The Duke of the Britons was ambushed and killed, and the commander of the south coast forts, the one they called the Count of the Saxon Shore.
Why do they call it the Saxon Shore?
Because we spend more time on it than the Britons.
Well, they ransacked his forts, and the troops that didn't run away were sacrificed to Woden.
So what went wrong? If we did so well, how did the Romans regain control?
Well, for a start, we didn't control the whole island. We had the countryside right enough, and lots of the country towns and villa estates. But the large cities like London and Colchester, they were a different matter. They just closed their gates and settled down for a siege. Well, our men weren't prepared for long sieges. And anyway, they could get plenty of loot without worrying about the cities, so the armies split up into small bands and roamed the countryside, taking whatever they came across.
But they were so busy collecting up as much as they could carry that they didn't notice that the Emperor's general, Theodosius, had landed in Kent with a large field army, and he took them all by surprise.
Yes, he swept right through the country, throwing us back into the sea and chasing the Picts and Scots back over the northern wall.
My father said that he was thankful to get back with his life, let alone with a ship full of treasure. And he took me with him to Woden's altar in the forest and sacrificed one of the Britons' calves for his safe return.
They've got a dog over there. I hope it sleeps well tonight, or I swear by the Dark Sisters its howling will foretell its own death. 'Cause it'll be the first throat I'll cut if it raises the alarm.
Grandfather, why is the dog howling tonight?
Oh, well, I don't know. But don't they say that if a dog howls at night, someone's going to die?
Oh, Father, don't say things like that.
I shouldn't worry. I'm sure that it's not us that the dog's howling for. I should think it's more likely to be the Empire.
What do you mean, Grandfather?
Oh, I just feel that the Empire's dying. It's getting too old, like me. It's like an old apple tree that hasn't been pruned for so long that all the twigs have soaked up the life that should have produced fruit. Our frontiers are far too long to be properly guarded. And the barbarians, the Goths, the Franks, the Vandals, and the Saxons worry away at us like a pack of yapping dogs, gradually closing in, waiting to tear us to pieces.
Don't take any notice of him. He's just a silly old man.
I think you're wrong, Grandfather. Rose ruled the world for hundreds of years. Nothing can beat our legions.
Ah, well, that might have been true at one time, but not anymore. In my grandfather's day, shining columns of Roman infantry marched proudly along Roman roads, taking Roman civilization to the corners of the earth. Bronze helmets and golden eagles gleaming in the sunshine. They had a duty, a mission to civilize the world. But I'm afraid that was a long time ago. Now the Empire's split in half, and every legion elevates its own emperor and then kills him when it's fed up with him. We've had 3 emperors in Britain in the last 5 years, and they're all dead. The true emperor is hiding from the Goths in the marshes around Ravenna and spends his time breeding hens. Oh, that's no way to run an empire.
But we still win battles. When Flavius Stilicho came to Britain 10 years ago, or whenever it was, didn't he drive the Picts back and clear the Saxon pirates on the Channel, just like Theodosius did before him?
Yes, but aren't they back again now? Nowadays we take one step forward and two back. Warfare's changed. These are modern times. Our legions don't rule the world anymore. Don't forget, I was with the army on the Danube 30 years ago, when the Emperor Valens lost his life and most of his legions to the Goths. It was the end of an era. I felt it even then.
What happened, Grandfather?
Don't ask so many questions, child. Your grandfather's tired and ought to go to bed.
No. Leave the girl. I'm all right. When you get to my age, sleep doesn't seem so attractive. I'll have plenty of that soon enough.
Oh, Father, don't talk that way. Antonius, if your grandfather refuses to go to bed, you'd better light another oil lamp.
In a minute. So what happened on the Danube frontier?
Yes.
Well, we thought we were attacking a small party of Goths who'd barricaded themselves behind some large wagons. So we started to advance, with our heavy cohorts in the middle and a small cavalry squadron guarding our flanks. When suddenly there was an almighty roar, and our left flank was hit by a huge force of Gothic cavalry. I can still see them now. They came down on us like a thunderbolt, screaming, shouting and cursing, smashing everything in their path. Our cavalry was caught completely by surprise. Those that weren't swept under just turned and fled as fast as their horses could carry them. And then the Goths were on us, the infantry. They were like machines. Swords and spears, cutting down and stabbing at our heads and faces. It was like the end of the world. We were packed so tightly we couldn't even raise our shields to defend ourselves. The air was filled with the screams of the dying, the drumming of the horses' hooves, the battle cries, the sweat and the sweet smell of blood and the smell of the horses. And you can smell fear, you know. Oh, yes. 2/3 of us were cut down before darkness fell. And the rest of us crawled away into the night to lick our wounds.
But our cavalry ran away.
They were only men. And they were no match for the Goths. They'd learned a lot of their skills from the Huns.
Who are they?
The Huns?
Yeah.
Oh, pray to the gods that you never see them. They come out of the depths of Asia by the frozen ocean, the fiercest warriors on earth. They spend their whole lives on their horses. They even sleep stretched along their horses' necks.
I don't believe you.
Yes, it's true. They're the finest cavalry in the world. They fight like madmen, firing their bows from the saddle at full speed. Yes, they eat raw meat and roots and dress in skins. And if they get a powerful leader, they'll conquer the world.
The light's still on in the house. Why don't they sleep?
Don't worry, let them talk. They've a long, long sleep ahead of them. Anyway, it's a nice night to be out on the sea.
You'd never think that at one time this stretch of the Channel was one of the most dangerous places on the ocean.
Why was that?
Well, years ago, all these forts along the coast were garrisoned by 500 or 1,000 men each, and there were catapults and ballistae set up on fighting platforms to guard the ships of the British fleet that sheltered in the harbours. And there were fast patrol boats watching out for our approach, with their ropes, hulls, sails, and even the sailors' uniforms painted or dyed blue so that they merged in with the sea. Often you didn't see them until it was too late, and they'd bring the whole navy down around your ears like a hornet's nest.
You see, the shores of Britain and Gaul are very close together just here. So to raid the rich villas along the south coast of Britain, you had to pass through this narrow neck of water, with the fort and the navy sitting there, waiting to spring the trap.
Yes. Of course, a lot of our ship's masters were brilliant sailors, and sometimes they'd muffle the oars with skins and row in under the cover of a dawn mist or a sea fog, right under the noses of the Roman lookouts. But they'd still have to run the gauntlet of the Saxon shore forts to get their plunder back home to the north.
But for the last few years, Rome has had so many problems on its own doorstep that it can't afford to worry about what happens out here. That's why so many of our ships are down here, and why the Irish King Neil of the Nine Hostages is raiding further along to the west.
They say that the Emperor Honorius has become a chicken farmer.
It'll soon be dawn, and Sky of Sword will taste its first blood. He'll go home a man, with tales to tell around the hearth on the long winter's evenings.
Father, come on now. It'll soon be dawn and you must sleep. The children have already dropped off.
Yes, well, let them sleep while they can. Oh, I see terrible times ahead. I don't know what sort of world their children will find themselves in.
I hope you're wrong, Father.
And you know what I think's to blame?
No, what?
Christianity, that's what. All these troubles are a punishment from the gods. I can't see how the whole civilized world can worship Jupiter the best and greatest, Mars, Sylvanus, and Mithras the unconquered sun for hundreds of years, and then overnight pull down their temples and denounce them in favor of the one Christian God. It doesn't make sense. I mean, have we been worshipping nothing all these years? I think the old gods are using the barbarians to crush the empire for having denied them. Oh, I'm going to go outside to watch the sunrise and make my peace with my God.
I don't know what to believe. They say that Christianity is the only true religion. But perhaps the old man has got a point.
Quickly!
What?
Wake the children!
What?
But keep them quiet. We must leave now. There are Saxon ships anchored just outside the harbour mouth, and they'll come in with the sunrise.
Children! Children, wake up!
What?
Wake up!
Oh, no, what?
Quickly,
What?
don't make a sound. Don't ask any questions.
Why?
We're leaving the village.
Take them out through the back, and keep the houses between you and the sea. Head for the London road. I'll catch you up.
But aren't you coming?
I'm just going to get the dog. I'm not leaving him for the Saxon butchers.
Right.
Thank the gods that everyone else has already left for the safety of the city. Now, quick, go now!
There, the sun's rising. Right, now, row right up the beach.
This is it, boy. Sword, shield, knife. You can be first over the side.
The Twilight Years was written and presented by Dave Arthur. You also heard Timothy Arthur, Susanna Dawson, Joe Dunlop, Maddie Head, Hayden Jones, Tim Monroe, and Stuart Organ. The incidental music was written and performed by Dave and Tony Arthur. The producer was Peter Hall.